Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the EmbellishPod. If you got it here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. If you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com. I'll try to get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at EmbellishPod or TikTok with the same handle. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. Today I'm going to have someone joining me that you guys might know from her past experience with one of the biggest bourbon brands in the world. But she's moved into a different segment around tequila, and I hope you guys enjoy this conversation. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be consuming this particular episode of the podcast. I have Katy O'Donnell joining me. Katy, and my audience is prevalently whiskey folks with a little bit of pop culture and a little bit of spirits, a little bit of coffee, a little bit of everything. So some folks may know you from other stuff, right? Because you spent a lot of years working with and around Buffalo Trace. It's a pretty big name in the whiskey industry or in spirits in general, but you're here with a different brand, a different segment, a different altogether situation. So just give us what you got going on now.
Yeah. So a lot of you in the whiskey world might know me from I was the national brand ambassador at Buffalo Trace Distillery for around 3 years. I'd worked for Sazerac for about 5 years prior to that in sales. And then I got the opportunity to storytell for, the greatest distillery that's, it's just like full of stories. Like you can't talk about one brand or one thing coming out of there that doesn't have an epic story behind it or, something that you want to tell and you want to share. So that was a huge part of my life. Absolutely love the bourbon industry, love the bourbon drinkers, whiskey drinkers in general, scotch, anything, like all about it. But my heart is in agave spirits. Specifically tequila. I've always wanted to work in agave spirits, and I've tasted and I've sold and I've worked with and I've been friends with people from mezcal to raicillas, bacanals to Sonora, like all these different kind of agave spirits, but tequila is really where I like to drink. So it's really exciting for me to now have this role with Tequila Tromba, which is where I landed now. I am the VP of brand development for Tequila Tromba in the United States. We are a very small and lean brand, but incredible quality. I stand behind it 100%. I'm a self-declared tequila snob. So I will only work with brands that I truly believe in and truly want to amplify. And Tequila Tromba came across my life and I jumped in, and I've been with them now for about just over 2 years. And it's been an incredible journey. I couldn't be happier. Honestly, I absolutely love going to Mexico, being part of their community, learning the culture more and more. It's already something that engages me and excites me. So it's been a fun journey. And you know what? There's a lot of similarities between aging tequila and the whiskey world. And it's been really fun to actually get some whiskey drinkers converted over to trying really good tequila and understanding what really good tequila is. So
you said a lot of things in there, right? So you talk about agave spirits, and agave spirits, aside from tequila and mezcal, you said a whole bunch of other names, which were like another language to me.
Yeah.
And effectively they are. And I think part of that is, Kentucky bourbon has spent, or bourbon in general, but Kentucky specifically, has spent decades building out its story, its provenance, the water, the limestone, the rick houses, all of those talking points that every tour everywhere does the same thing. It feels like, and being an outsider, you could tell me if I'm wrong here, but it feels like tequila is still building that story, right? You guys, what you're doing is crafting that future for a broader culture. Has there been anything that you've been able to kind of carry with you, or have you had to unlearn things moving from, bourbon to tequila? There are some similarities, but also some stark differences in a good way.
Yeah, they are definitely very different from the source, like the grain. We're not using grains. We're using an agave plant, right? So the time in the land is really, really different. We're talking about an investment into a plant for 6 or 7 years versus a crop grain that is harvested seasonally. So there's a lot of differences. The barrel proof entry, I think, is what gets a lot of whiskey drinkers' minds like rolling, and mine too. When I first started, I didn't really understand. I was like, I don't understand why you can't make the tequila more high proof before you put it in the barrel, but that's just not how the spirit works. And so there's been a lot of things that I haven't necessarily had to unlearn, but digest and then figure out how to communicate that to a broader audience that's used to a different style of production. And I think the link between whiskey and tequila comes in the barrel aging, which ironically is not my I call myself a Blanco baby. Like I want to drink Blanco tequila. I really feel like that is how you can really know the identity of a brand before it goes into the barrel. Whereas in whiskey, if you're drinking the White Dog, that's a different story, right? It's very different. And you're not going to proof down a White Dog and put, a 40% unaged whiskey into a bottle. So the aging process with tequila is kind of where the symbiotic comes to. So you still get those same barrel aging flavors. They're a little bit more subtle and they interact with agave differently. One of the cool things about barrel aging that I got to experience through my time at Buffalo Trace was there's a line of tequila that's aged in some of their very high end barrels. So there'll be a Weller tequila, they'll be not a Weller tequila, but a tequila aged in Weller barrels, a tequila aged in Taylor barrels, a tequila aged in Sazerac rye barrels. And so I started to notice how that barrel actually influences the tequila differently depending on what has been in it before. So there's a cool transition there where I feel like I understand the aging process really, really well for tequila and can communicate that to whiskey drinkers. And then maybe we'll work backwards. So eventually they'll start to be a Blanco aficionado and lover like I am.
Yeah. And, being able to try to, effectively be a translator to an audience like whiskey drinkers, because, and I'm going to broaden out and say whiskey drinkers, because as much as they want to differentiate Scotch drinkers, bourbon drinkers, rye drinkers, American single malt drinkers, they're all the same people, just with a different interest, right? They all speak largely the same language, and they'll tell you why their favorite is better than anything else that's in the world. But at the end of the day, the education is the same, whether it be mash bills or aging or entry proofs, all of those different things. And you gave us you gave us a few things that are kind of some of the differences in what educating a person like me on tequila is like. What's maybe the hardest thing to kind of come across? Because you can find the similarities, but then there's some things that just kind of break us beyond, like what you said with the entry proof thing.
Yeah, the entry proof is crazy. People, what I noticed at Buffalo Trace and through the single cask selection program, which we do in tequila as well, people want high proof. They want that, stag proof point. They want, something that's going to give them a lot of flavor. They want it unfiltered. They want it to be this, flavor bomb. And that's possible in agave, but it's very different because you're not gonna, it's extremely hard to get anything over, I would say, 55% out of an aged tequila. So that's very different than what their palates are. So it's kind of just mentioning that, the process is different in production leading up to barrel entry. So we're only, double distilled and usually alembic stills or copper pot stills, those kind of things, which don't get the proof point really high versus a copper column still where you can get really, really high alcohol levels out of it. It's regulated to be that way. And then the actual interaction with the wood when you're aging. So if I go back to that single cask idea, the climate is completely different. If you think about Jalisco, Mexico, if you have not been, it is incredible. Guadalajara is my favorite city in the world. I can confidently say right now. And it's hot most of the year. Like it doesn't snow. It's not like Kentucky. It's not like Scotland. It's not like these places where the barrel is like working in a different way. We actually age underground to help prevent the really, really high heat. But when you do that, the proof levels, they don't necessarily go up. They tend to go down. And so I think that's the biggest struggle is letting people know that it doesn't have to be the highest proof. And the filtered versus unfiltered is kind of a new topic for me on tequila, actually. We can touch on that. But the high proof aspect is like just understanding that the spirit's threshold is lower than a grain spirit, than a whiskey spirit. In Mexico, if anybody gets to go there or even some other countries, the actual ABV of the tequila will be around 38%. It's not even at 40%. The way that the beverage has been, historically enjoyed has been at a lower proof point. It's more enjoyable to people in a lot of ways. And so it's kind of it's culturally opposite of like the really big Scotch whiskey lovers, and then your agave lovers.
Yeah. And it sounds like to me, maybe the thing that I have to kind of flip in my brain is, You know, we look for higher proof because at least some whiskey people, I think there's a downward trend. I think people are kind of moving away from, we've blown out our taste buds for the last 5 to 7 years. Maybe it's time to calm down a little bit and find out what exists at 100 or 105 proof, because everybody's liver needs a break. But we make an assumption that if it's a higher proof, it's because there are some aging things that are happening. We're having some evaporation. It's sitting for a longer period of time. It's in a unique climate. Whereas with something like tequila, you're talking about putting it underground so you can age it without huge losses or the heat beating down on it. And so losing proof becomes a sign of care, whereas we're looking in Kentucky where gaining proof is a sign of care. And so you're having to kind of, flip your brain on that a little bit. But I'm curious, you mentioned filtered versus unfiltered, because that's another conversation amongst whiskey nerds about, which is better and which is not better, and is it chill filtered or not chill filtered, or, what are you doing with it to not adulterate my whiskey, that kind of thing. What does that look like in tequila?
So strangely enough, I didn't really think about it. It's not something that tequila producers speak to as openly as whiskey producers. So recently I was down on a single cast trip in Guadalajara with some whiskey buyers that are historically whiskey buyers. And the question came up about, do you chill filter or not? And I was like, wow, no one's ever asked that question in tequila in my world before. And yes, we do chill filter. Yep, we do. It's the same as any other product where you want to make it as clean on the shelf as you can make it. And I think especially in tequila, where there are a lot of skeptics around additives, around, just quality of production, and it being a lesser, I don't want to say trusted, but lesser experienced spirit, that, they want to chill filter that so that it's really clean and crisp and clear on the shelf. I challenge any of your listeners to call you or message me, because I've been looking for a non-chill filtered tequila that exists. Because I don't know if they've even explored that. I'm sure somebody has, right?
Right.
But it was something that I didn't even think about, and it is absolutely integrated into the process of making tequila. So really remarkable.
So we've talked a little bit about just tequila in general, but I do want to, let's shift and let's talk about Tequila Tromba specifically, right?
Sure.
It's got its own origin story. It's a smaller brand. You indicated it's a smaller brand that's intentionally small. It's some people building a brand, bottle by bottle, bar by bar, whatever it takes. Making a transition from something like Sazerac or Buffalo Trace to a smaller brand, I imagine, I work in a big corporation, is a little bit freeing because you get some freedom to do some things. But what's the story about how Tequila Tromba became a brand in its trajectory?
Yeah, so this is our flagship bottle right now. It's hard to read. We are doing a little bit of a rebrand, so it will hopefully pop out a little bit more as we get into it. But Tequila Tromba was launched in 2009 by a group of people, 2 Australians, a Canadian, and 2 Mexicans. It sounds like a joke, right?
Right.
It sounds like they'll lead up to a joke. But they had all met. They met in Guadalajara. The Aussies and the Canadians were at university and met a gentleman there whose father actually was a predominant tequila producer or distiller in Guadalajara, and had been working for really large brands. He started off with Don Julio, had worked for a lot of other brands throughout his currently 50-year tenure in tequila making. So expert human. And he really wanted to cultivate his own brand. And in Australia and Canada at the time, this was around 2000, the brand launched in 2009. So prior to that, premium tequila, 100% agave, good tasting Blanco tequila was not really available in those markets. And they tasted it in Guadalajara and really wanted to expand and bring it to their home countries. So they partnered with this gentleman. His name is Marco Cedano. He's a legend in the industry, and he had always wanted his own brand. So Tromba, which translates into big rainstorm. So every year in August, around, July, August, these big rainstorms come through the highlands of Jalisco, and they revitalize the agave. They also provide the deep well water that you use to proof down your tequila before you put it into a bottle. A very influential part of the tequila process is this Tromba. So he named the brand Tromba, and he cultivated his own yeast, 2 different strains of yeast, and used his expertise in distillation and production to create this incredible brand. And so together, the 5 of them launched Tromba in 2009. It started off in Australia and then Canada. And in 2014, it came to the United States. So a little bit farther after. And when it came to the US, we were really almost like not ahead of the game in a way, but like the United States was really, really tuned into 100% agave. I think before some other places, the proximity to Mexico definitely has, an influence in that of education at the ground source and knowing what the options really are. So came to US in 2014 and we've been growing ever since. Now we are becoming a much more larger global brand going into Japan, India, UK, and really, it's a heartfelt brand from Marco. He wanted to put his own stamp and his own legacy into play into a brand through distillation. I mean, he's a master chemical engineer, scientist, nerd, right? And wanted to produce the cleanest, most pure form of 100% agave. And that's what we have in Tromba now. So pretty cool stuff.
I've had one other tequila brand on before, and I know tequila is and has been a growing segment in the US for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Folks are very interested in learning about something new, and there's always kind of been this, it feels like a horse race of like, what's going to be the second big spirit in the United States aside from bourbon, right? Because vodka is always going to be a spirit in the United States, but that's a cocktail culture thing. That's not like, I want to sip or drink or learn more about it. I just want to buy clean vodka to put in a drink. So it's been this like horse race between rum or tequila, or is American single malt going to sneak in there? And it feels like tequila is the thing there. But from what I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, in tequila branding, what we know as non-distilling producers are far more prevalent than what we were used to within whiskey. It's a really common practice to have a handful of distilleries and then the brands go and purchase the tequila from them based off of whatever it is, or they, contract distill maybe at a different rate than what we're used to in the United States. Is that true?
That's a fair assessment. Absolutely. Yep. And interestingly enough, I think that was really, really an important part of the conversation at the beginning of tequila coming into the US. And as we start to educate people about the realities of producing in Mexico and what that looks like, their minds have been opened a little bit into what the realities are. And there's different layers in there too.
Yeah. And the reason why I kind of queued that up is looking at a brand like Tequila Tromba that is coming from a distiller at this point, right? This is a distiller influenced brand at this point.
100%.
It is unique in the fact that it is maybe closer to its distillate than some of the other brands in the market. Not saying there's anything wrong with the way those go, because that's more common in tequila, but it's been, it's in this distiller owned segment of spirits that is not necessarily as common for that to be the case.
Yeah.
And also a really hot segment for people to come in and, buy a brand, right? Because you've got, 47 different movie stars that want to start up their own spirits brand and then sell it or whatever. Being independent and distiller led feels like it gives you a little bit of an extra badge of like authenticity. Is that a part of, the long-term strategy for the brand of like, we're going to stay authentic? Is that part of its identity?
Absolutely. It's 100% part of its identity. So Marco Cedano, like I said, there's this funny thing that they say when they first started getting into business with these other gentlemen, he said, no gringos in the kitchen. Like that was it, right? Like he's like, this is my kitchen. I'm going to make this tequila my way. And so you have some distilleries in tequila that are owned by the family for generations. You have an incredible brand called Siete Leguas that is one nom. They only make one thing. They only make tequila. They're nom. So those of you who are listening who don't know what a nom is, it is basically, I call it it's like the zip code of the tequila. It identifies the distillery where it's produced at. It's very similar to a DSP in whiskey, but it's on the side of every bottle. You can't really see it on here, but we're at nom 1547 currently. Now, we don't own this nom. Like Siete Leguas owns their nom. They own their distillery and they make their tequila. We don't own 1547. But unlike what you're talking about where someone can come in and say, hey, you have a master distiller who runs this distillery. I want them to make my tequila and have them produce it. No, we're like right in the middle between those two where Marco comes in and he takes it over almost like a commissary kitchen, right? So he comes in, we clean the equipment and we go in and we produce our tequila under our standards, and it is completely distiller owned. So while we don't have the luxury and the generational history to have our own distillery, there is still such a sense of commitment to what this product is and that it has its own identity no matter where it is made. So it could be made in any kitchen, right? If you're doing a pop-up and you're a chef and you fly to Atlanta, that's not your kitchen, but your food's going to taste the same, hopefully, maybe a little different based on ingredients, but that's the concept behind Tromba. And, actually Marco is now 75 years old and he's ready to, he's retiring. Like he's like,
Mm-hmm.
put 50 years of work into this industry, and his right hand woman, her name is Lilia Quintero. She's been with him for 20 years. She started the brand with him. She actually came out of university as a chemical engineer saying, I want to make tequila and I want to follow one of the masters of tequila. So she reached out to Marco to get an internship. 20 years later, he's passing the torch over to her with the recipe, with the conviction of production and the dedication to consistency and being present and helping this brand continue to be what it is. So
Mm-hmm.
we're really excited about that, where you can pass down a recipe and have the same kind of care and attention given to it, so Tromba can live on, through
Right.
generation.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting setup, right? And in whiskey we're seeing different ways for folks to produce in a similar way that are starting to develop now, where a distiller can go into certain contract distillation sites and they can take over and they can distill and they can tweak the things that the way they want it to be, or there's automated processes, or any of those number of things. But having you guys are I think you used the term scrappy, maybe you said that, or maybe I imagined that. You're a smaller, scrappier brand. It feels like not having the overhead of having a distillery could be a benefit to the brand, because you don't have the capital expense of having a distillery. Like that's a huge, huge expense, going in and being able to make what you need to make and then coming back out and having your product without having to pay taxes
It
on
has its
property.
pros and cons, because so the interesting thing, like I think about Tromba for our Blanco, for example, a lot of times we're like order fire in a way, right? We have these projections and it's the time is spent in the ground. These plants take 7 years, 6 to 7 years to grow, to mature. So when we get an order for tequila, we'll say, okay, this is our order. Let's find a harvest day. We're going to go find the right agave that are ripe at this moment. We're going to harvest them. And then it's about a 7-day production run from the agave getting harvested, being dropped off, getting cooked, getting milled, getting fermented, the juice getting fermented, distilled. Right? That takes about 7 days. So we have to schedule.
Right.
So it would be great if we didn't, right? If we just owned the distillery, we could walk in any day and say, or we could constantly be making. But we have these little small batch, as you want to call it. They're actually like an actual definition of a small batch.
Right.
Is there's actually kind of one in tequila. Is that we make one batch at a time during our allotted time, and then when we get the next opportunity to move into that distillery and do another batch, we do it again. So
yeah, and so go ahead. Sorry.
No, I love it. I haven't had this conversation, to be honest with you, with people who really understand whiskey production. So it's really exciting for me to have it.
You've mentioned a term a couple of times, which carries some weight in Scotch whiskey, but I want to understand the difference here, right? So you've said Highland, right? And in my research, there's also a lowland in tequila, and that is, what does that mean? How is that a differentiator within tequila?
Sure. So the geography of Jalisco. So there's 5 states in Mexico that can produce, within the domination of origin, can produce tequila and call it tequila. It's made from one plant called the blue Weber agave. That's it. There's no other plant another agave you can use to make what's called tequila, and it needs to be in these 5 states. Jalisco is the heavy lifter. Jalisco is like the Kentucky of tequila. And within the geography of there, you have Guadalajara, which is like the center hub of the state. That's the major city. And then you have Los Altos, which is the Highlands, as we translate, which is up in the mountains. So it's a higher elevation. The agave grow on the side of these really high mountains. The soil is more clay. It's more, it's more like red clay soil. It's a very different kind of soil than if you go from if you think of Guadalajara as a spoke. The highlands go that way. The lowlands or the valleys go this way. And that is more about, they're surrounded by a volcano. So they have volcanic soil, which is much more mineral forward. The agave tend to grow in the valleys versus on the mountainside. Some of them, of course, do grow up on the side of mountains up there as well. But generally speaking, the terroir is very different for these agaves. So they grow slightly differently. But what I think the biggest difference is your water source. Because a lot of brands that are truly craft and authentically produced will source their water from where they're producing. And you have different types of water because the rainwater filters through the soil and it gets different minerals and it gets different flavors. And then you put that into your agave that have already grown in these different kind of climates. So the flavor distinction, in my personal opinion, and I do believe that palates are relative. I'm not a big fan of tasting notes, but generally speaking, your Los Altos, your Highland tequilas will be more sweet, more citrus forward, a little bit cleaner, a little bit brighter, like just have this little not effervescence in the sense of bubbles, but like a brightness. And your Valle tequilas will have more minerality, a little bit more earthiness, a little bit more rich vegetal flavor to them, almost like just like a lower, I don't know, there's like a lower vibration in a way. So that's the biggest difference between those two.
And I agree with you. Tasting notes are completely worthless, right? Because unless you've had the exact same thing that I've had today and the exact same life experiences that I've had, this is a thing that I've talked about a lot, right? Anybody who ever tastes whiskey, they're like, I taste banana. Well, what does banana mean? Is that banana pudding? Is it banana runts? Is it banana milkshake? Is it a ripe banana? Is it an underripe? Those are all different flavors. They all mean different things. And when you say banana, what do I think of? I have no idea. And so it's sort of pointless. I try to start with like, this is good.
Yeah.
Right? I like this thing.
I like this.
Right. And sometimes I found that sometimes people are more receptive to saying this tastes green or red, or give them a color, right? And I know that's a specific condition that some folks have, but like it takes away language we understand and replaces it with just, a sense, which is what maybe makes more sense. But it makes a ton of sense to me for the flavor profiles to be different given how it's grown. It's an awful lot like grapes, right? And where, you're in a more rocky clay-based soil, or you're in a mineral-rich ash-based soil, and then the water is going to impact it as well. We're just trying to set some understanding of what does Highland mean, what does lowland mean, because what you guys do is Highland. Now, you've mentioned agave plants, and the very specific agave plant that you have to use to be able to make tequila. The plants, I think you said 6 to 7 years old is how old they have to be before they can harvest. If you have whiskey can react to demands in its grain and consumption, but we have to sit on aging whiskey, right? So we have to guess based off of where the market might be in 5 years of what we need to put in a barrel today. But it feels like for tequila, you have to guess what you might even need to distill 7 years in advance, because it's going to take that long to get plants without just wiping out every agave plant that exists. Do you have to do that, or do agave farmers do that and you purchase? Like, how does that work out?
So the market does dictate how the farmers plant. Absolutely. And we are coming out of a really big boom for tequila. There was a while there where, the projections weren't on track and they were scrambling to plant, and maybe some farmers overplanted, and now not that the demand has lessened, but there's just now an overabundance 6 years later of mature agave. So it is definitely a conversation between what the markets are demanding and projecting, which is hard. 7 years out is hard. And then the farmers take it on, and they're such an integral part of tequila production. And they honestly, they hold the key. It's not the warehouses. It's the fields. It's the lands. So they have to project and those projections, they're kind of, ebb and flow, that 7-year life cycle, right? So you might be, you're really excited, and then the producers don't necessarily need to buy as much tequila. So there's extra agave out. And that's what we're starting to see right now. Not in anything that's catastrophic in any way. The agave plant is very useful in a lot of ways, but it definitely did take over a lot of cultivating the land. Like the Blue Weber has taken over. And so here we are now. At Tromba, we have our trusted partners that we've worked with. We actually don't own our own agave fields. Some of these generationally, established brands do own their own fields, and they get to do that all internally, right? Like they can project what they want to do, and they get to do that in partnership with the fields that they own. For us, we don't buy from the open market, which is another thing you can do in tequila. You could just say, hey, dear agave farmer, I need this many agave and I don't have a relationship with you. What's your price? For us, we're right in the middle again, where we're working with the same agaveros for about 4 decades now, with Marco's history, right? From the 70s until now, he's been working with the same people, and they're really smart and they really understand what they're doing. So we trust them wholly, and we give them as many projections as we can. But it's always it's a 7-year ahead. I don't know where I'm going to be in 7 years.
No, without a doubt, that's no truer words have been spoken today. I also think about I talked to a kava brand a few months ago, and they're harvesting a thing that has to grow for a while, and it has a very distinct region where it can grow, and it has a very distinct set of conditions, and that can ebbs and flows and market conditions can create stress on ecology and availability of the plant. In the whiskey world, we don't think about corn and soy as much, or corn and wheat as much on that, but we do think about barrels and wood and what is that going to do to forests or whatever. Is that a similar problem with agave plants?
Yeah.
Considering their age?
Yes, it is. And so at Tromba specifically, we are really, really, really dedicated to sustainability. So 2 weeks ago, I was in Jalisco in Guadalajara out in the agave fields planting some rare and almost endangered agaves that have been kind of removed from the ecosystem because Blue Weber makes the money, right? Blue Weber is what makes money, and you want to put that in your land. Absolutely. And in doing that, you sometimes farmers will push out other species that are really important to the ecosystem. So what we do at Tromba to try to counteract like the effects that tequila has on the land is that we do this. It's called the Agave Rewilding Project. And every year we take a group of bartenders down. This year was Australia, Canada, US. In Mexico, we had 25 people out in the fields actually the agave fields where we take our agave from. We are putting in these sanctuaries, these little optional areas where these agave can then live their full life and contribute back to the ecosystem. Something that's really interesting for people who maybe not be too aware of the agave plant as a species. They have two ways of reproducing, right? You can the way that we currently use them to reproduce is they create these little clones that come out on either side of them. If you have a succulent, you've seen this with aloe plants. They do the same kind of thing. They push out these little hijuelos, as we call them. And those, after they're about a couple months old, they get taken out from the mother plant, put into a nursery, and then replanted. And they're the next generation of Blue Weber agave. The other way agave can reproduce is it can produce what we call a Quixote, which is a really large stalk. Anybody who lives in a semi-desert area in the United States, California, Arizona, Texas, you'll see agave that are wild and they flower. They have this huge stalk that comes out of the top of them and then these beautiful flowers. And that's for pollinators. It's actually for regeneration of the plant in a way that's not a clone, right? It has more biodiversity and it can live longer, be stronger. So, but you cannot let an agave plant, a Blue Weber agave plant, flower if you want to make tequila. Mm-hmm. Cannot, because all of that sugar goes right up into the flowers. That's its reproductive source. So you have to harvest the agave plant before that happens. And so you're effectively eliminating a lot of the ecosystem by doing that. So what we do at Tromba is go back in with some of these other agaves, find a plot of land where we can plant them and let them just live their life and let them be part of the community and continue to hopefully regrow some of this overcultivation that we've seen over the past couple of years.
So, and you said to be tequila, right? It has to come from the Blue Weber specifically, but what you're replanting is not that. Do these have any intended use in long term other than they're just here for the ecology? They're just here for the ecosystem to operate. Yep.
That's all they're there for. They are there to replenish the land, the soil, everything around them.
Yeah. And that says something, right? Because I've been around the ag space for a while, and sustainability can be a buzzword or a marketing ploy, right? And oftentimes you'll find on the backside of sustainability, there's still some degree of profitability by saying sustainability, but indicating that you're going to go out and plant something that you can really never do anything with other than just let it stay there is a different kind of vibe. But you said you're partnering with farmers. How are they, I guess, when they go to replant, if you're planting these other non-Blue Weber plants, are they planting in other locations, or is this like a cohabitation situation? Are they interspersed with each other?
Yeah, currently we have our little sanctuaries. So there are like little pockets of the mountain that are not they're adjacent to the Blue Weber, but not really.
Gotcha.
In the next round, I think next year what we're going to work with, because the farmers are becoming more educated, right, about how they can treat their land to actually make the better tasting agave, so they can actually get the higher price point for them. We're going to try to do like alternating rows of farming. So that's our big goal, is to really, really make a bigger impact across the entire fields.
And maybe there's a straightforward answer to this. Maybe there's not. I think about Blue Weber is a specific strain of agave, but then I also think about, other crops that exist in the world, tomatoes or potatoes or corn, and there are, specific versions of it, but then even within them, they have different strains, different variations of Blue Weber. Is that a thing, or is just Blue Weber is all effectively the same?
Blue Weber effectively is the same because of that cloning process. When you get down into areas like Oaxaca, where mezcal is prominent, and you're looking at, they can use up to 50 different species of agave being the big mother species. They can use all different, or genius, whatever you want to call it. I haven't been in science class in a long time. But you have the agave plant as like the overall arching. And then there's different ones. You have Espadín, you have Tobala, you have Tobasiche, you have Tepasate, all these different varietals of the agave plant, of which Blue Weber is one. And now there's 200 some plus versions of agave, only 50 of them are generally have the sugar content to produce a distillate, and only Blue Weber is for tequila. So, and because Blue Weber is predominantly cultivated through clones, they stay pretty genetically sound. Now, if you're down in Oaxaca necessarily, and they might be letting more of these wild agave flower, they might cross-pollinate and create some kind of, subspecies of the mother plant. But in tequila, it's really straightforward.
And then one last question around plants specifically.
I love it. It's fun, right?
One of the things that I know about cropping culture is that using clones can create situations where they are less resilient to pest pressure or to some type of, infestation or infection. Is that the case with blue agave, or does the environment sort of handle itself there? Because I'm thinking, American regions of growing, which are very different than, high desert or, mountainous regions.
Yeah, it's been an issue in the past where there have been some plagues that have hit the agave plants, and one infected plant can then, just lead to all of them, or they're all, to your point, they're just genetically weaker and they're more susceptible to diseases. And that has happened in the past. I think with current modern practices and attention to the plants and the, attention to, maybe you need to shift your pesticides. We really like to use organic pesticides as much as possible. So how is that possible? Like, how can you really monitor your plants if you see one that is not feeling well? Take it, study it, test it, find out. And that happens a lot. There are systems in place with the CRT where if you have a sick agave, you can bring it in and test it to find out what it's lacking, what it needs, how you can avoid a catastrophe like we've had in the past where it can wipe out almost an entire species. It's a real topic. I love that you're so interested in farming because it's like the heart of tequila.
Yeah, there's a traceability aspect that I'm sure you guys have to deal with, in fact, of knowing what happens to what plants before they go into the bottle. You said you like as much organic pesticide as possible. In farming, that's not always possible to be 100%, right? This is just the way that agriculture works. If you want a repeatable product, doesn't always work that way. I live in the real world with everyone else. I'll shift a little bit away from that. A part of the distillation process, right? So you're using what comes out of the agave plant as a liquid base. But that leads to the assumption that there is some sort of fiber or physical product that's kind of left behind.
Yes.
What is that and what happens to it?
So there are two physical things that are left behind in the process. The first is what we call the bagazo, which is the fiber. So when you take an agave plant out of the earth, it is a solid starch. Like it is just, you need to, they cut them in half with these huge, like these guys just work their asses off, and they cut these in half and then we cook them. So it's like roasting a vegetable in a way. And then after we do that at Tromba, we cook for 24 hours. We test to make sure that the sugar content we like is there. And then we let them rest in the ovens, sealed. And we only use ovens. We do not use any industrialized process for our cooking. So after the 48 hours of the whole cooking process, then it goes through a mill. You can use a Tohono stone, which is a really big, large volcanic rock that's super artisanal. It's super ancestral. We use a roller mill, a 4-stage roller mill, which is a little bit more industrial, but allows for the agave to be juiced still in a way that's not aggressive. It's not aggravating. It doesn't need any kind of instrument like that. So after that, you get this juice, the mosto, which is basically, it's just the agave juice after you juice these cooked agave, and what's left over are the fibers. So those fibers can be used for a lot of different things. Some people will throw them back into fermentation to add a layer of sweetness. Some people will use them for compost and for their fields. What we do is we actually take those and we make them into replacements for single-use plastics. So we have a sister company called Sustainable Agave Company that utilizes our bagazo or our fibers after we crush them, and we make them into straws. We make them into forks, knives, cups, to-go containers, things of that nature that is really helpful. I mean, some of it does go back into the land, of course, but for the most part, we're using it for those resources, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I did a little bit of research, so I sort of knew that, and I just want to get to the answer because I love agave straws.
Yes.
From a biodegradability standpoint, and the fact that, your options for non-plastic straws are like three different things. You can have reusable straws that are either going to be silicone or they're going to be metal, and you can never clean them out very good. And the silicone always sort of tastes like soap, and the metal always has a little thing on the inside. Paper, which everyone should throw away and never ever use again. And then agave. And at one point I was talking to another brand within the whiskey space. I was like, you guys should figure out a way to take stillage and turn that into a straw, because that would be a good way to get rid of something that's hard to get rid of anyways. But I don't have the science background to understand that. But it is good to see. So you've got, the ability to commodify what is effectively a waste product that would be used for a lot of other things, but in a positive way that then impacts the environment in an even better way later on down the road, where you don't have a sea turtle with a straw in its nose again.
Yeah.
It's fantastic to think about that. We're pretty close to time here, and we haven't really talked about, aside from the one bottle you've shown me, like, what do you guys have? Right? We've seen the one bottle.
You saw one bottle. So we have Blanco, Repo, and Viejo. Reposado is aged for anywhere. Our Repo is like about 6 to 9 months in a barrel. We use American oak. It's a mix of different, whatever we can get our hands on. A lot of our barrels are from Jack Daniels. They're the most readily available, but we're not afraid to use any kind of American barrel. We do rechar them before we put the tequila in, and then we'll use them about 4 or 5 times before we will char them again and use them for another, 4 or 5 fills. We have Añejo, which is about 20 to 24 months. And that is just, I have a little bottle of that here. So you'll see the color. It imparts a little bit, but it's not, you can tell this is an additive free tequila. We're not throwing in caramel coloring. We're not throwing in oak extract, none of that. This is really, truly what you're getting out of the barrel. We have a coffee liqueur that's incredible called Cafeto. If you do like coffee, it's a tequila-based coffee liqueur. It's really clean, easy drinking. And then we have a couple other, we have an extra Añejo and a very special Reposado. But my favorite thing that we have is this big boy right here that I'm going to show you. And it has it has a dispenser on it right now because you're drinking it. So this is my child. Mm-hmm. I have no kids. I have this bottle of Tromba. This is a 3.75 liter bottle of tequila. So this was legalized by the TTB in January of 2025. And we were really excited when we saw it because we were already serving 4 liters in Australia. This was already available in Australia pretty much. So I was like, well, let's bring it to the US. Why not? We already have the bottling line. We already have the materials. We already understand the concept. Let's try it. So we brought this into the United States last October. So it's been here just for about a year. It's really, really cool. It leans into our sustainability practices because this is equal of 5 of these bottles in one. So I'm not using 5 times the glass, the cork, the labeling, anything. Everything is also hand labeled at Tromba. So there's a lot of it's not cutting corners, but it's just like slimming down the production line to put it in here. So we can pass that savings onto the consumer. This is suggested retail about $75 for this bottle. And it's also like way less waste. And this is my fun little dispenser that we have for it. You ready?
I love that. And I like the fact that it is, going to be friendly too, but it's tequila in the same way that a lot of whiskeys are. It feels like a more communal spirit, right? It's not like vodka is a thing that you're going to have in a bar, which is sort of communal, but not really the same way, right? The tequila feels like a thing you might want to have on a back patio with friends in the same way that a lot of whiskeys are, except for there's different seasons. Maybe, most people in the United States, whiskey's the wintertime thing and tequila's the summertime thing for us. And having the dispenser makes it so much easier than, somebody fumbling the ball.
Yeah. So I have this set at 20 milliliters. So cuts it right off at 20 mils.
That's perfect. And, the longer the day goes,
you can increase
the more useful that is. And the fact that you're not trying to guess at how much it's always going to be that exact amount.
Yeah, it's a really fun thing. This bottle will make you 64 2-ounce margaritas. So it is it's like it's the best party. Like show up to a party with this. You brought the bar. This in a case of squirt and a bag of ice. You brought the whole bar. Like
right.
It's
Is that your go-to? Is tequila
Paloma.
and some squirt, and that's your drink, or do you have something different you do?
That is, oh, so my go-to is a margarita. I'm really, really, I just love a Tommy's margarita, which is just lime juice, agave nectar, and Blanco tequila. That's my jam. But if I'm feeling fancy, I'll have a Paloma, which, yeah, I like to use like a grapefruit soda, tequila, a little squeeze of lime, maybe a dash of salt over ice. I keep it really simple. If you're drinking good tequila, you don't need to hide it in anything. I mean, obviously, like I love a hibiscus margarita. I love a
Hmm.
watermelon margarita, like all of those fresh flavors. But if you have a really clean tequila, the classics just, they crush.
Well, and as much as a hibiscus margarita is good, it also takes significantly more work than having a few things on hand. Because over the summer we worked on a recipe for a blood orange Paloma, which was fantastic. But we're like actually juicing a whole bunch of different things, and it's not sustainable for a long term or a quick drink, right?
Yeah.
You got to be invested in it. You mentioned you put agave nectar in. What is there a brand that we should be looking at?
I like sheer agave personally. SHEER. It is available on Amazon. It is associated with Tromba, so we know the production process. We're really, really proud of it, and we like it. So that's my brand that I go to, and you really can't go wrong. But when you are mixing with agave, some agaves are like, if you get like a raw agave, sometimes it can be really thick and viscous, and
Yep.
you need to
Yep.
cut it, right? So you need to add some water to it or use less of it in your drink. So I think a taste test based off of your preferred sweetness level for any agave choice that you make is good to do before you mix it, so that you're not even, you can always add more, but you can't take it out.
Right. Yeah. I use raw agave as my coffee sweetener instead of sugar or something else. That's what I prefer.
Yeah.
And when we were working on that, I just made a simple syrup out of the raw agave. So that way it is bringing it down to a thinner thing. So you guys you've been in the market in the United States for a long time. Are there places, or where should I be buying? Will I see you out in a market or at an event or at anything going on in the next 12 months? Like how do people know where to find you or your bottles?
Yeah. So our key markets are like the big major markets: Florida, California, Arizona, Illinois, New York. That's like really Texas, of course. It's like where we really hone in. Actually, unfortunately, this is not legal in Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, or Michigan. So you can't find that there, but every other state should have this big boy in it. California, Nevada, and Texas have this at Total Wine. And we're at a lot of like smaller retailers. Actually, some of our biggest markets are out on the East Coast, rather, like Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina. Florida's a really good one for us too. But yeah, that's where I would look for stuff. As far as where to find us, we like to pop up at little agave shows here and there. We're not going to be like doing everything. This year we did Arte Agave in Arizona, which is a really fun tasting moment. It's kind of like your big whiskey tastings. They have those for tequila as well. So keep your ears to the ground for us and come find us. We are definitely more of an on-premise brand, so you might see us more at your favorite bars than you would at your favorite liquor store, but that's a great excuse for you to go to your liquor store and say, I want to take this really amazing tequila that I had at this bar home. Can you order it for me? And
Right.
that generally works pretty well.
Yeah, someone needs to tell Florida that Texas sells those things, and maybe they'll figure it. Because I honestly, if Florida doesn't have it, that's the surprising part to me, is because I think everything's legal in Florida, right? At
But we
least
were shocked. We were like, you draw the line here?
there's a lot of thought process there. Katy, we're at the end of our time.
Thank you.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wish we had talked about, or that we missed, or are we good?
No, I think we touched on a lot of really cool topics, and I hope that people feel really excited and intrigued to go out and to try some tequilas. I know there's a big conversation about additive free that happens a lot, and listen, people might prefer additives in their tequila. That's fine. If that's the flavor profile that you like, that's the flavor profile you like. People always ask me, well, how do you know? How do you know if it doesn't have additives? Well, I taste a lot of tequila, so I can tell by my palate immediately. Just like, I mean, in bourbon, you can't have additives, so it's like harder to discern. But once you start to drink more and more tequilas, be exploratory. Like, try different brands. Don't necessarily stick to one. See if you can go someplace. If they offer 1 ounce pours, taste them. And you'll start to notice, like, you can read the headlines, what flavor profiles might have additives, and you can decide for yourself. But I think that's another thing is I hope people are really excited. Go explore, try really good things. Tromba lives alongside some really great brands, in my opinion. We're right up there with G4, with Fortaleza, with Siete Leguas, with Tequila Ocho. These are like brands that have been a little bit more established because they do have generational backing. But
Right.
the liquid in this tequila and in many other tequilas are just as incredible. So taste, try, be exploratory.
Hey, that and that's it. We're still we've got at least 2 more months of really hot weather, so tequila is right for this. And I think you could probably sneak it into the fall season, into bonfire season. You can kind of get in there. Maybe it doesn't fit at Christmas, or maybe it does. I mean, you can find a way to squeeze it in at Christmas time, I'm sure. So, thank you for giving me a little bit of time this afternoon. I'm excited to see what happens with this and what you guys have going on.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time, John, and I appreciate your interest.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the EmbellishPod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if at all possible. Hit me up on social media on TikTok or Instagram using @EmbellishPod and give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can also be found at www.embellishpod.com. It's all of my links, accounts, contact details, and maybe even a few music reviews. Thanks for stopping by.